Imagine living in a world where reading the wrong book could get you burned alive. In the Middle Ages, some texts were so dangerous that kings, popes, and inquisitors tried to erase them completely. Yet, whispers of these forbidden books survived tales of hidden knowledge, secret sciences, and even magic. Were these manuscripts truly evil, or did they simply challenge the powerful? Today, we're opening the dusty covers of the books you were never meant to read. The medieval church had strict control over what people could know. Officially, knowledge came from the Bible, church-approved texts, and a handful of classical authors, but curious monks and scholars discovered writings from ancient Greece, Rome, and even the Islamic world. Some spoke of medicine, astronomy, or philosophy that clashed with church teachings. Others dared to suggest that humans could question divine authority. For the powerful, this was unacceptable. Knowledge wasn't just education, it was control. One of the most feared texts was the Picatrix, a massive book of astrology and magic translated from Arabic in the 13th century. It described how to summon planetary spirits, create talismans, and even alter reality through rituals. To church officials, this was witchcraft in disguise, but to scholars, it was a bridge between science and magic, between curiosity and heresy. Copies were hidden, passed in secret, and read only in whispers. Imagine studying it by candlelight, hoping no one ever found out. And it wasn't just magic, even science could be forbidden. Think of Roger Bacon, a 13th century English friar who studied optics, astronomy, and mathematics. He wrote about using lenses to improve vision, hinted at inventions like telescopes, and believed in experimentation. But to many, this smelled of arrogance trying to uncover God's secrets without permission. Some of his works were banned, and he was even imprisoned. Yet today, historians call him a pioneer of modern science. But sometimes the forbidden books weren't about science at all. They were about power. Chronicles that told embarrassing truths about kings, poems that mocked nobles, stories that suggested ordinary people had rights too. These texts weren't just dangerous ideas, they were threats to the entire social order. So, the question is, how did these books survive centuries of burning, banning, and censorship? The answer lies in the brave and sometimes very sneaky people who risked everything to preserve them. Another infamous work was the Book of Enoch. It claimed that fallen angels had taught humans forbidden knowledge, metals, weapons, sorcery, even cosmetics. For church leaders, this story raised too many dangerous questions. If angels could rebel and share secrets, what did that say about God's perfect order? The book was banned, hidden, and nearly lost. Yet fragments survived in monasteries, and centuries later it resurfaced in Ethiopia, shocking scholars who thought it was gone forever. Then there were the heretical Gospels texts that told stories of Jesus outside the official Bible. The Gospel of Thomas, for instance, suggested that divine truth was found within each person, not through priests. Imagine how radical that sounded in an age where the church claimed to be the only bridge to God. These books were hunted down, copied in secret, and buried in jars to escape destruction. Some lay hidden in the desert for over 1,000 years. One of the most shocking forbidden works wasn't mystical at all, it was scientific. The writings of Galen and Hippocrates, ancient doctors, explained how the human body really worked. They spoke of circulation, surgery, and natural causes of disease. To medieval authorities, this clashed with the idea that illness was always a punishment from God. Still, daring physicians copied these texts, sometimes hiding them behind false covers labelled prayers to avoid suspicion. And then there were books that mixed truth with fear, grimoires, or books of magic. The Ars Notoria, for example, promised its reader instant knowledge, the ability to memorize entire libraries, and even visions of angels. Was it holy inspiration? Or dangerous sorcery? Copies were rumoured to drive some readers insane. Others claimed it actually worked. Imagine the temptation. One book that could make you smarter than every scholar alive. Who wouldn't risk it? But what made these books truly dangerous wasn't just their content, it was who controlled them. A banned book in the hands of a poor villager might mean nothing, but in the hands of a noble, a priest, or a scientist, it could spark rebellion, challenge church authority, or even change history. That's why the Inquisition devoted so much energy not only to hunting witches, but also to hunting books, because an idea, once written down, is almost impossible to kill. Some monks risked everything to preserve dangerous knowledge. In hidden corners of monasteries, they copied banned texts by hand, disguising them as prayer books or hymnals. These secret scribes believed knowledge was a gift from God, not a threat. Thanks to them, fragments of Greek philosophy, medical treatises, and even mystical writings slipped through the cracks of censorship. Without their quiet rebellion, much of the world's heritage might have vanished forever. But not everyone was so lucky. Some scholars were caught with forbidden books and punished severely. In Paris, students were warned that owning heretical texts could lead to expulsion or worse. In Italy, the Inquisition burned manuscripts in public squares, turning parchment into ash before horrified crowds. For the authorities, this wasn't just about destroying words. It was theatre, a warning to anyone tempted to read too much. Yet, despite the danger, people still sought these books. Why? Because they promised answers. Answers about the stars, about the human body, about freedom, about God himself. And sometimes those answers worked. A doctor with a forbidden text might cure an illness. A peasant who read a banned gospel might suddenly see the world differently. The more the authorities tried to erase these books, the more precious they became. But who exactly were the readers brave enough to risk everything? One famous example is Giordano Bruno, a philosopher who dared to read and write ideas far beyond his time. He believed the universe was infinite, filled with countless worlds, and that no church could contain truth. To the authorities, this was madness, heresy, and rebellion wrapped in one. They arrested him, interrogated him for years, and finally burned him alive in Rome. His crime wasn't violence, but thought. His books outlived him, inspiring generations, and Bruno wasn't alone. Across Europe, thinkers, healers, and even ordinary villagers risked their lives to touch forbidden pages. Some hid books in cellars, others sewed pages into clothing. A few smuggled them across borders disguised as trade goods. Knowledge travelled quietly, like contraband more valuable than gold. And every time a book survived, so did a spark of human curiosity. That spark would one day grow into the Renaissance. The Inquisition wasn't only about witches and heretics, it was also about controlling ideas. Lists of banned books, called the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, grew longer with each century. Some titles stayed on it for hundreds of years. Imagine walking into a medieval library and knowing entire shelves were off limits, locked away by chains, guarded as if they were weapons. For the church, they were weapons, dangerous ones, sharper than any sword. Public burnings of books became acts of power. Authorities wanted to show that no thought could stand against their will. Yet paradoxically, these fiery spectacles only spread curiosity. If a book was worth burning, it must have been worth reading. Crowds whispered about what was inside, and rumours gave forbidden texts a kind of dark glory. What was meant to erase knowledge often made it unforgettable. Some rulers even used forbidden books for their own gain. Kings and nobles secretly collected grimoires, astrological charts, and mystical texts, not to destroy them but to use them. They wanted power, prophecy, and advantage over rivals. Behind locked doors, some of the very people who ordered burnings were quietly reading the very same works. It's a story of hypocrisy and a reminder that censorship often hides desire. Meanwhile, ordinary people found creative ways to resist. In villages, ballads and stories carried bits of forbidden ideas, disguised as songs or folk tales. A story about a wise woman could secretly spread medical knowledge. A tale about a wandering knight might hint at rebellion. In this way, forbidden knowledge lived on in memory, even when parchment turned to ash. By the late Middle Ages, whispers of hidden books spread across Europe. The printing press was still a century away, but already the idea was growing. Maybe knowledge didn't belong only to kings and priests. Maybe it belonged to everyone. And once printing arrived, the dam broke. No amount of fire or fear could hold back the flood of ideas. But the story of forbidden books doesn't end here. It only grows louder. When Johannes Gutenberg unveiled the printing press in the mid-1400s, everything changed. Suddenly, knowledge could spread faster than it could be burned. Forbidden books multiplied, copied in hours instead of years. Authorities panicked, issuing new bans, but the tide was unstoppable. For the first time, ordinary people could touch knowledge once reserved for elites. It was the beginning of a revolution, not just in reading, but in thinking. Of course, the church tried to keep control. The index of forbidden books continued for centuries, blacklisting authors from Galileo to Voltaire, but censorship had lost its teeth. Once ideas were printed and spread across borders, there was no turning back. What had once been whispered in candlelit monasteries now thundered from every town square. The age of secrets was ending. And yet, forbidden books never truly disappeared. Even today, governments and institutions ban or censor texts they fear. In some places, reading the wrong book can still get you arrested. The Middle Ages may feel distant, but the struggle between knowledge and power continues. The question is, do we ever really learn from history? Or are we doomed to repeat it? Perhaps that's why the story of forbidden books fascinates us. They remind us that ideas are alive, that a page can threaten kings, terrify priests, and ignite revolutions. They show that no matter how many fires are lit, words have a way of surviving. And sometimes, the most dangerous idea is the one that refuses to die. So next time you open a book, any book, remember this. In the Middle Ages, someone might have risked their life to preserve it. Words that were hidden, hunted, and condemned now lie quietly on our shelves, waiting to be read. They are proof that knowledge is power, and power never gives up easily. The real question is, what stories today will tomorrow's world call forbidden?